On January 1st, Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, also known as Lula, became the 39th president of Brazil, after beating former president Jair Bolsonaro. But this was not Lula's first run in politics, having served as the president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010, where his approval rating reached a staggering peak of 87% towards the end of his second term. Aided by the commodities supercycle at the time, the Brazilian economy grew by an average of 4% per year during Lula's presidency, whilst policies such as the Bolsa Familia program aiming to reduce inequality in Brazil helped boost Lula's popularity over the course of his leadership. But whilst this widely popular president begins his third term as president, his involvement in one of the largest corruption scandals in Brazilian history and eventual imprisonment taints his legacy, making him one of the most divisive leaders in current politics. Lula was born in October 1945 in Caetés, Brazil. Growing up in an impoverished environment, Lula had little formal education and left school early on to work and help support his family. In his early 20s, Lula became involved with union work, joining the Metal Workers Union and eventually became union president in 1975. It was in this role where Lula notably launched a series of strikes in the late 70s against Brazil's military government's economic policies. Lula led 500,000 workers who demanded a pay increase, which they eventually won. It was Lula's charismatic leadership that made him successful in his political career, beginning in his mid-30s as he co-founded the left-wing Workers' Party. After having 3 failed presidential campaigns, in 2002, Lula finally won the presidency and became the first left-wing president since Brazil's military dictatorship began in the 1960s. Lula is undoubtedly one of the most popular leaders in Brazil's history, having served 2 terms and laying the foundations for Dilma Rousseff to take his place as president in 2011. But whilst many have criticisms of Lula and his policies, there is one scandal that looms above all. Petrobras is the Brazilian state-owned oil company, worth a whopping $70 billion. State-owned being the key word, meaning that the Brazilian government is in control of its policies and who leads the company. But in 2014, the Brazilian Federal Police opened up an investigation into the company, revealing a web of bribery, money laundering, and corruption. This investigation implicated Petrobras executives and high-ranking politicians, including Lula da Silva. And this investigation was termed Operation Car Wash. What the investigation revealed was that various politicians and executives for Petrobras had accepted bribes of various forms in exchange for rewarding contracts to companies for their construction services. These construction firms would then overcharge Petrobras for their services, with the bribed executives turning a blind eye to the situation. The scandal was far-reaching, leading to the eventual conviction of 159 individuals and revealed that $2.1 billion were accepted in total as bribes. Among those implicated in the scandal were former presidents Lula and his successor Dilma Rousseff, who was impeached in 2016 following these revelations. But the allegations against Lula were serious, with prosecutors describing Lula as the ultimate commander of the scheme and other acts of bribery. Lula was eventually found guilty of accepting $1.2 million in the form of construction improvements to his house by a construction company that had been receiving contracts from Petrobras. In 2017, Lula was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison for taking part in the corruption scheme, which was later extended to 12 years after Lula's failed appeal in January of 2018. But this wasn't the end of the ordeal, when information came out suggesting that the judge and lead prosecutor of Lula's case conspired to convict Lula. Drawing international support from some of Lula's supporters, including US Senator Bernie Sanders, a strong case was being made to free Lula. Following changes to mandatory imprisonment laws in 2019, Lula was released from prison after serving 580 days. And in 2021, the Brazilian Supreme Federal Court ruled that the judge of this trial was biased against Lula and invalidated the cases in which the judge had brought against him. Throughout this ordeal, Lula has maintained his innocence, whilst his supporters claim that the accusations against him were politically motivated to prevent him from running for office. Despite this, Lula remains greatly popular, and having run for president once again in 2021, is now serving his third term as president and the first president in Brazilian history to be elected in to do so. But Lula remains a polarizing figure in politics, with opposition supporters going so far as storming the capital in protest of his inauguration in January this year. Whilst his supporters celebrate the social and environmental policies that his leadership has introduced, there is no doubt that Lula has had a strong impact on the people of Brazil and will continue to shape Brazilian politics for the next few years. But despite overcoming his many triumphs and tribulations, the controversy of his past will forever loom over his legacy. Thank you for watching Olive Stripe Productions. If you enjoyed this video and want to see future videos on a wide range of exciting relevant topics, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to be notified of future videos.